welcome to the Garden Like a Guru show. And we're back again with our weekly show here on how to grow your own garden, how to manage it, and now we're coming up to the harvest time, how to get ready to harvest and how to prepare for the winter. So we think this is important because food security is becoming a big issue worldwide, and learning how to grow your own food is part of becoming a sovereign human being. And my co-host for today and every day on this show is the one and only Sarah Bradshaw, the garden guru herself. And so welcome back to the show, and we're talking about getting ready for the fall.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
We very important, every stage of your garden, every stage of your whole kind of food production takes a lot more planning than people often take into account, and it's very easy to get kind of caught up in the moment, and it's hell when you get caught up in the moment and the right tools are not there, you come roaring in, with your harvest, and there's no place to put it. And, one of the first steps that I get into, and I'm going to drop this one, and then we'll do our weekly review, is sometime in late June, early July, I go to my canning cupboard and I bring absolutely everything to the forefront that I know I'm going to have to replace this year, so peaches, like if I've got last year's canned peaches in the cupboard, this becomes problematic, so late spring, early summer, we eat a lot of the stuff that I froze last year, a lot of the stuff that I canned last year. And I hope you do the same because, it's easy to lose track and have stuff in the back of your cupboard and you find out like it's 3 or 4 years old. It's getting iffy. Yeah, now you've not only wasted your money, you've wasted your time, you've wasted that space. Like a little bit of organization goes a really long way.
Yeah, so label everything, put a date on it, please.
Yeah. And and ensure that you put it away properly. So one of the reasons we're addressing this right now is because we are in the fourth quarter, the final quarter of the last summer moon. Okay.
Yeah.
The new moon that is coming up on Labor Day, which is a whole week away, is the new moon of the harvest moon cycle. Okay, now this means we're likely to get a frost.
Mm-hmm.
Now, keep in mind, the new moon sets the intention, puts the new energy out there, but we tend to, go back to the old habit until we get all the way to the full moon. So the new moon's that little foretaste. And then once we get 2 weeks into the full moon, we are going to see that energy in its full manifestation. So, we're coming up to the harvest moon cycle. This means that the next full moon we see will be the harvest moon. So, we got to get on it.
Yeah, this is the time, right?
Yeah, it is. And so, right now we're in Gemini. So being in the fourth quarter in Gemini, we're not looking at planting anything in the next couple of days here. And even on Tuesday, when we slide in late in the day, when we slide into Cancer, still not a good time to be planting. This is like, it's not yet that fall planting cycle. It's the end of this last summer moon. And as such, there's going to be a lot of stuff coming ripe. And when I think of the wheel of the year, and, to me, the best representation in my mind of the wheel of the year is that sort of yin yang give and take that we see between the god and the goddess. So, way back in February, in Imbolc, in the dead of winter, we have the conception of the goddess, and that's going to start coming. And as that goddess energy grows, that winter god energy starts to relax. So then we get into Beltane and Easter and all that beginning goddess energy. And then you have the young maiden energy with all that fertility and all that yumminess, and the god energy is backing off. And now, we've had the conception of the god. We've had, Lunasa or Lammas at the beginning of August. That's sort of the first hint of the god beginning to come into the power, and the goddess energy ripening, so we're coming to fruition of that goddess energy. And so that's something that we really want to focus on in this coming week, and make the most of it. So by the time we get to Friday, we're going to be moving out of Cancer and into Leo, which is a heavy fire sign. I mean, Leo is just the fire of fire. So, here we are, the end of summer, we've got all this fire energy. we're saying goodbye, I hope, to the forest fires, but we're embracing this fire energy in a cosmic sense. Wonderful time to eradicate weeds, wonderful time to get rid of stuff you don't want in your garden. Like if you cut it down, dig it out, eradicate it at this time of year, burn it, spread the ashes where you don't want that plant to return to, put out that intent and energy. That's a wonderful use of this fourth quarter of this wonderful summer moon. And in and through all of that, you need to start really getting a handle on preserving your harvest. Okay, so first and foremost are those fragile seeds. And if you have not already done so, this is the time of year to protect those seeds, okay? Like you want them to come ripe, but you don't want to lose them on the ground. And amaranth is a really good lesson. If any of you grew amaranth last year, you are already coming to grips with the concept that if you wanted that amaranth as a grain, you might have already missed the harvest. It might already be on the ground, and indeed might be germinating already because it's just that quick.
Yeah.
So, this is the time that if you haven't put cheesecloth bags or paper bags or some sort of collecting device on those precious seed heads that have the tiny little seeds, get on it. Okay, it really does matter. If you haven't started gathering your nasturtium seeds now, do it. When at this time of year, when you go back and nasturtium, I love nasturtiums, but they're big, huge flowing plants, and all those big, gorgeous, colorful flowers. They always remind me of Spanish ladies in their flamenco dresses. You've got these bright colors and these big trailing, flowing things. Well, when you come along and you lift the skirts of those flamenco dresses, you will find the ground absolutely littered with seeds. They are the easiest of seeds to gather. It's like picking up dried peas from the ground. It could not be easier. What you might not know about nasturtium seeds is that they pack a probiotic that is so potent that it actually is borderline antibiotic. And it is something that I recommend that you really, really stock up on, not just to replant for yourself, but as an incredible medicinal last ditch that could truly save you from a really bad viral infection or a really bad internal bacterial infection. Now,
well, it sounds pretty important for this time on the planet now.
Absolutely. Now, when you eat a nasturtium seed when it's fresh, it tastes very radishy, and they dry. And when they dry, they become as hard as rock. You cannot do anything with them without soaking them thoroughly for about 2.5 to 3 days. Okay. It takes a while to soak a nasturtium seed back. But do gather those seeds and do hang on to them. Um, the plant itself is medicinal. The seed is magically medicinal, and so you want to be getting on your seed gathering. Other things that you need to be attending right now are your greens, okay? Your oric, your lettuce, your spinach. These are all going to not only be setting seed, they're going to be starting to drop them soon. And what you don't want to have happen is you don't want those seeds left on the plant so long that the fall mists and mold and rain turn them into little slime bombs that are infected with mold and mildew and other stuff that is going to make them unusable to you. Yeah. So cheesecloth is a really good means of wrapping your seeds so that they don't fall all over the ground. Brown paper bags are grand too, and you can literally tie them right around the seed head and let the seeds fall into the bags. It works. White paper bags are actually incredibly good because they let in enough of the light that if the plants are still flowering, like lettuce is self-pollinating, it doesn't need the help of an insect. So if you put a cheesecloth or a white paper bag around it, those seeds will continue to grow, those flowers will continue to grow, but they'll drop it all inside the bag for you. So seed saving is something that you want to take some safeguards right about now. Um, it's also the time to not harvest certain things that you're harvesting for collecting. Like you're probably frantically getting the last of your cucumbers in so that you can use them. But keep in mind that the cucumber, to set seeds, to get viable seed, you have to leave some of them in there till they get the size of small squash and look like they're about to explode in the field. And, so keep that in mind, that you have to let them continue to mature. Same with your beans. You're now going to be running this little bit of game with your beans of how long can you leave them on the plant to get, good fat bean seeds, and how early is it going to freeze, because, you don't want them frozen on you. So, your beans, you're in this kind of little bit of a run up to the end of the harvest, but do keep in mind that, things have to come to full maturity out in the garden. So some things you're going to be gathering, others you're going to be marking to make sure you don't inadvertently I had somebody very helpfully gather my pumpkins one year, and I just wanted to cry because for good seed viability, you actually want the plants to get touched by frost, and then your skin's nice and hard and that.
Right.
Now, this is also the time of year where it is so important that you assess the state of your food storage facilities. Okay. Is your root cellar ready?
No.
No. So, between now and the next full moon, that's 3 weeks, you're going to want to get in there. You're going to want to empty it completely out. You're going to want to make sure that any toads living in it are happy in there for the winter and they're going to do okay. You're going to want to clear away any old cobwebs, but you don't want to get rid of all your spiders. No. But if you whitewash your root cellar, now's a good time to do it, because it's still pleasant enough during the day that you can tackle something big like whitewashing, you know, where
Why
you
would you whitewash your root cellar?
keep down bacteria.
Okay.
Okay. Whitewashing is something that was always done to hen houses in the springtime and root cellars someday during the summer. Okay. So if your root cellar has dirt walls, as a lot of the old ones did, whitewashing it every year actually, you know,
Seals it. Yeah.
reinforces,
Okay. That makes
seals
sense.
it,
Yeah.
and that. But whitewash also, you know, makes it really hard for mold and mildew to grow. In your chicken house, it provides a certain amount of protection from lice and fleas. But in your root cellar, it's really about the mold and the mildew. And as my mother used to point out, so you know it's clean.
Right. So it looks clean.
Yeah, you know, so you know it's clean. You know,
Right.
like you know that that's whitewash, not bird poop.
Yeah, it
You
does
know,
look similar.
yeah, you know, so you know that you've got a clean shelf there, not one that you know got all the gunk brought in from the garden as well as the produce. So you know, get your root cellar ready. You know, clean it out, get out any old garbagey things you don't want. Make sure that you know you've got it set up the way you want it set up. Ditto with your pantry. If nothing else, even if you don't do anything else with your pantry, bring out all of your old canned goods, all of your old pickles, all of your old canned things that are in there, and ensure that they're used up rather quickly. Um, when you carry things over from year to year to year, you're ignoring that things have a shelf life. And no, they might not be bad in that they make you ill, but they might just not have the nutrition that
Right.
you're really craving from it. But you know, the other thing, Tyson, and I know you'll get this, and so will a lot of our people, there's an energetic quality to everything in our lives. And you know, dragging the same crap around year after year after year after year is just not good,
No.
you know. And one of the things that I've been known to do, and I feel no guilt about it anymore at all, is I feed my compost pile. Um, Now, it can be seen as somewhat depressing to haul a dozen or so jars down to a compost pile, pop them open, and pour it out rather than eating them. But you know where I really have no problem at all is taking things out of the freezer.
Yeah.
And okay, I have seen people keep, my favorite was 4.5-year-old frozen squash.
Oh my God.
Why?
Yeah.
You know, and the person was, oh, it's still good. And I open it up and I show them that, you know, there's ice crystals on every single piece of squash in there. And, oh, but it's still good. For what? It's good for compost at this stage. You know, there's no nutritive value left. I'd be surprised if there was any flavor other than the flavor of a dead freezer. And you know, it's like get rid of it, toss it, get it out of there. There's a reason on the underside of your freezer that they tell you how long things last in the freezer, and that's for your own enjoyment and your health. And you know, when you just sort of drag it through year after year after year, you know, it's sad and it's tired.
Yeah. So what you're saying, and I think it's really important, you know, even if you put it on your calendar, just in your mind's eye, that this is really the time where you go through and late summer as you start eating up all those peaches and canned whatevers and making fruit salads or whatever it is, or to get it all ready for the new go around, right?
Yeah, yeah. You want to start as fresh and clean as you possibly can. I always felt New Year's Day should be, you know, October 1st.
Yeah, I think you're right. Sort of cornucopia. I love the whole idea of cornucopia where there's unlimited abundance, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and so you want to celebrate that. Now, this is also the time of year to think about using as you harvest. Okay, like if you have an absolutely fabulous recipe for apple cake, make it with the fresh apples and freeze it.
Hmm.
Okay.
That's
Yes,
a great idea.
turn if you've got the time to turn those apples into pies and freeze them, do it. Um, I'm years ago, a friend of mine, Yarrow Alpine, wrote a lovely, lovely little book called Strong and Independent. And in it, she shared not just like gardening information, but sort of communal living and community building. And in it, she shared a story of, a visitor to the farm who was going to make everybody, her famous, wonderful apple cake with walnuts. And she'd gotten this and she'd gotten that. And she was merrily opening jars of freshly canned applesauce to make her applesauce cake. Well, there were literally bushel baskets of apples all over the kitchen that people were peeling and trying to get into the jars and into the freezer. And it was like, no, these apples are rotting right in front of you. Would you please use them?
Right.
And so, anything that you have that you like to get going in terms of your little treats and that, see if you can whittle the time out to get them into the freezer and attended to.
Yeah, I
Uh,
really like that. We've had apples from last year in my fridge, and I'm going to make a pie out of them. Well, I never made a pie out of them. I never got to them. But if it was a pie, I bet you it would be eaten. I know it would be eaten by now. So I love your idea of like take the extra step. Don't just freeze the pie filling. Make the pie and freeze the pie, right?
yeah, make the apple crisp and feed the apple, freeze it,
Yeah, freeze it, and then you're all ready, right?
Yeah, heck, make a big batch of the topping and freeze 5 of them. My pie crust recipe makes 7 pie crusts.
Right, great.
That gives me 3 pies and a bunch of tarts for a turnover.
So do you actually make the pie, or do you put the pie filling in and freeze it separately, and then do your?
I actually kind of like to completely assemble certain things and have them ready. I mean, some things I'll freeze apple slices as well. But there's something about taking out a lasagna and putting it in the
I
oven,
agree with you.
taking
I
a
think
pie
so.
out and putting it right.
Yeah.
It's like the thinking's done, the work's done.
No, yeah, just we heat it up.
Yeah, heat it up, scoop of ice cream, good to go. That's dinner.
Yeah, I like that idea. I think that's the new mantra I'm going to use. Like, just prepare it. Like, get it done, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Now, over and above, like, your food harvest and that, there's other things in the garden that this is the right time of year to attend to. Now, at your place, we'll have a clematis and some roses that really need a little bit of help.
Yes, true.
It could be left for springtime, but if you do it now, if you've got the time to do it now, you'll have a lovely result in the springtime. You really will. So, fall pruning, you can get a go on fall pruning. Things are going dormant. They are. You look around, the leaves are turning, so you can start doing your fall pruning. Nothing's going to bleed to death. Nothing's, in big production mode at this point in time. So, that's a good thing to get out of the way. Fall planting is right around the corner. So, Tyson, have you ordered your garlic?
I don't use garlic,
You don't use garlic, so you don't have to plant garlic.
but I used to. I used to try and see how many varieties of garlic I could get in one garden. I used to be quite the aficionado. I mean, there's so many varieties of garlic. It's amazing, right?
Exactly. And you want to be planting garlic in October,
Mm-hmm.
which is only a month away. So if you're ordering garlic and getting it in for you to plant, now would be the time.
Yeah.
This is also the time to start nosing around at the stores and looking for those fall bulbs. It's not quite yet time to plant them yet, but it's sure time to go looking for them if you want the best of all selections.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't dug them out of the ground yet and you love your dahlias and gladiolus, well, you're going to want to get on that too, because not only do you want to dig them, you want to make sure you have them the right temperatures and time to lay them out in the sun and let them dry so that they don't rot on you. And,
Absolutely.
you
I
know,
lost my whole collection by not doing that, right?
yep.
So,
So,
and that was one of my favorite things was how many varieties could I have, right?
yeah.
In the garden, and I loved it. But I gave that responsibility away, which I never should have, because it's something you have to be consciously doing. You got to dig them up, sort them out, clean them up, and get them ready for next year, right?
Absolutely. So this is the time of year to be attending to that. And of course, if you're going to be doing any big planting, of trees and shrubs, you need to select your site now.
I just really got it. Just pressing. I started out with 15 cuttings. You already know of grapes, right?
Yep.
We're down to 6, and 3 of them now have mold on them, right? So now I'm down to 3, and they were beautiful. And here we are in the last stages, getting ready to transplant them. I don't know where it came from anyway. So I separated them out. So now I'm down to 3. So again, you have to really think ahead when in the spring of, yes, it seems like 16, cuttings to do grapes is way obsessive. But by the time you get to the end of the year, you could be losing an awful lot of stuff. Like I may be lucky if I get 3 in the ground this year, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You might have been able to do a peroxide spray on those mildewy ones, but you don't.
I did it with hypochloric acid.
Yeah.
They're all going like,
Yeah, but no go, huh? And
Well, we'll see.
certainly
We'll see. We'll see.
you certainly don't want to introduce a problem into your thing either.
Oh,
But yeah, if you're going to do fall planting, you've got to prep your site. Now, you were talking about moving a rose bush, so this would be the time to select that rose bush, because you got to remember that old adage that a $10 rose in a $1 hole in the ground isn't going to do nearly as well as a $1 rose in a $10 hole in the ground.
oh, I love that. That's a really good,
Yeah.
point.
So you
And
want that.
they
Yeah.
need to be fed too, right? I mean, I
So
like
you need that $10 hole in the ground, and you need to work on it now.
right. So what's your favorite thing to put in for roses? I mean, I used to like to put bone meal in there for roses, right?
Yeah. Well, of course, my absolute favorite is chopped up fish.
Oh yeah, well that's a bit stinky, or seaweed, but we're not.
Yeah, but of course, I mean, you bury it, so you don't really smell it. So if I've got a fisherman friend who will give me a couple of fish carcasses,
Right.
nothing makes me happier. Failing that, I use a combination of bone meal and fish fertilizer.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I find that is really quite effective. Um, if I can't, an alternative to bone meal is the high nitrogen bat guano, which is getting harder and harder to get a hold of because of white nose disease and other things. So they're restricting the movement of bat products like bat guano.
Has that been a problem here, Sarah?
No, not particularly, but fruit bats produce a high phosphorus bat guano. Your insect eating bats produce a much more high nitrogen bat guano. If you've got a bat house, collect the guano.
Yeah, we got to get it up. I got to get out there and feel the pull and get it up. So
Yeah, but they want that high nitrogen, but they kind of like it in a slow release form. So
Yeah.
the bat guano, the blood meal, mixing it with the fish fertilizer kind of stabilizes them, gives them another whole range of stuff that you want from them. Once they're up and going, I like to top dress them with something that's a little heavier on the phosphorus, so something in more of the 1052
Yeah.
10 range, or a high phosphorus bat guano works well as well. Um, yeah, so but you want your hole that you want to transplant your rose in should be 3 to 5 times the size of your root ball.
No, thank you, because that was my next question, right? So
Yeah.
exactly, you just answered it, right?
Yeah, you want something 3 to 5 times the size of your existing root ball. And you want the bottom third of that pretty heavily fed.
Right.
Okay, so
That's where your stinky stuff
yeah,
goes.
yeah, that's where your stinky stuff goes. Then bury your rose in fairly deep. Make sure if you've got a grafted rose that you don't bury the graft. That's really important. And then fill it up with a slightly lesser quality soil and mix that soil heavily with the existing soil. What you want to have happen here is you want your roots to have to get really going before they get to the edge of that
Right.
hole so that they've got the strength to penetrate. Um, Also, this is an excellent time of year to be preparing your ground for any of your fruit trees that you want to get in the ground. And again, don't skimp on the hole, make it massive.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just like to say, put a little plug in here for muscle testing and dowsing, and L rods, especially for fruit trees. They'll tell you exactly where they want to be. So do douse, and you'll be surprised that where they actually want to be planted, and trust that. Mine did one of the holes I had to do. I had so many rocks. I thought, oh God, this is terrible. But I live in a very rocky place. But the trees will tell you much quicker than smaller plants, because I think because of their size, they can communicate easier, or I can pick up their vibration. But they will tell you where they want to be planted. So don't be afraid to muscle
Well, I've
test.
always known you were a druid. It makes sense that you'd be able to talk to the trees
Absolutely.
and they
Talk
talk
to
back.
trees, right? Exactly. Right.
But yeah, no, that's very, very good information. There's a few rules of thumb, like don't plant a species where you took one out. Okay. So if you take out apple, don't plant an apple or a pear, plant a cherry or a prune. Vice versa. If you've taken out a plum tree, don't plant a cherry or a plum tree or any drupe. Don't. And a drupe, by the way, is a fruit with a stone in it.
Right.
So your drupes are your apricots, your peaches, your plums. Like don't and your cherries. Don't plant a drupe where you took a drupe out of. Plant a pome, plant an apple or a pear. Switch it up. But really, you can replace a tree with a tree as long as you keep a few things in mind. Do douse, do ask.
Do ask. Yeah.
Yeah. If your tree, like say you bought a tree back in June, July, it was the end of the season, you got that fruit tree, was in a big pot, you kept it live all summer long. It's time to plant it now. It's been sitting in your yard, in your environment, in your world for a while now. Mark it so that when you transplant it, what was facing north is still facing north.
Good point. Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you bring it home from the nursery, you've resigned yourself to the fact that you've already lost that opportunity.
No doubts.
Yeah, or dows. But, if you had it in your yard, that tree is already starting to acclimatize.
Wow, I never thought of that, Sarah. That's so important because I know in dowsing there's actually a gateway of energy into every tree. So knowing where that gateway is of where the energy flows in is really critical. So thank you for that. I never even thought of that. You can douse, well, this is where the tree wants to be this way, right? Not just this way, but
Yeah.
how is it relating to the sun, right?
Yeah, you don't want to lose that time,
Right,
like not if you don't have to.
right.
And, so now another thing for both your rose and your fruit trees, and this is one of the reasons to prepare in advance, pre water your holes.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Pre water them. When you've dug that hole and you've got stuff in it, even if you put that one third full of fertilizer and stuff, fill that hole right up to the top with water and let it sit. And 2 or 3 days later, go out again and fill it right up with water and let it sit again. And do this right up until you plant your tree. When you plant your trees or your shrubs, water them in really well.
Yeah.
Give them way more water than you think they're going to need. And then in the fall, like in the late fall, after the first frost, but before the ground is really frozen, give your trees between 20 and 30 gallons
Wow.
of water poured into their root ball over a period of a week or two. With roses, about a quarter to a third of that. Okay, so the bigger the rose, the more. You probably don't have to go over 10 gallons for a rose, but do water them in really well. And then what happens is as they thaw out in the springtime, they have ample reserves. Okay. Now, I have been talking xeriscaping for many, many, many years now. And this is the time of year. If you are wanting to embrace a xeriscaping design and you've been, thinking about it and considering and that, this is the time of year. Okay. With xeriscaping, you use native plants. You use the plants that exist in your environment on their own and who do really well in your climate. You plant them in the fall. You do your preparation of your soil and your sites. If you're going to be putting in swales, if you're going to be putting in, terraces, any of that kind of land formation stuff, you do that the previous summer. Then that fall, you do your planting. You water absolutely everything in. Next spring, when things come up, you water, you tend, you take care of. That fall, when you put your garden to bed, you never have to water it again.
Wow, that's great.
Yes. So this is the way this is kind of step one to getting back to food foresting. This is step one to getting back to what grew here before people arrived from Europe and said, let's cut all them trees down and put a hayfield over there and a pretty little garden over here and bring on those sprinklers and get that water out of that lake and up onto this hillside. And
they created so much work for themselves, it's exhausting.
Yeah. And, and so xeriscaping is step one for most of us to getting back to that. And, years ago, I had a student who said to me, well, can I learn to garden where all I really have to go out and do is go out and pick stuff? And I was, yes, Jill, you can. come with me. Let me show you how to do that. Because you can. Instead of a lawn, you can have a beautiful mat of wild strawberries. Instead of a decorative butterfly bush hedge, you can have ocean spray and super berries and go out and gather them in Saskatoons. And you can have thimbleberries and wild raspberries, and you can have hazelnuts, and you can have an amazing amount of stuff. If you've got water, you can have watercress. If you've got, a boggy place, you can have mallows. Like there is almost no limit
Right.
to what this earth can feed you, how this earth can feed you. So this is the time, like you have the time still to get out that pen and paper, to get out that list of xeriscaping plants, and to commit yourself to doing that as your way of having what I call the non-lawn yard.
I think it might be worth we're even talking to our neighbors because we have this little patch of forest beside us, and I'm sure they're pretty interesting people that we would probably be able to look at that as a little food forest, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
right there, and it's a buffer zone, and they love it as a forest, and I don't see why they wouldn't, allow us to go and play in there, right?
Yeah, and rather than thinking food forest, as I've seen some people attack it, where we'll plant some Italian prune plums and some of our hazelnuts and that. Take that idea away, okay, and look at making it into a food forest where the people are almost incidental,
Right.
okay. So often we get very, very focused on what we want as opposed to what the forest needs. And, aronia is important to plants or to animals as well as us. Saskatoons, the birds eat them. Wild raspberries instead of domestic ones, wild thimbleberries, uh, high bush cranberry, huckleberries. Like I'm not above buying and planting in huckleberry bushes. They're an indigenous part. The other day, I had hummingbirds neglecting the feeder and going all ape over the blanket flower. Now, the blanket flower struggles. It is so fragile, and we grow it in gardens as gaillardia, but like take some of those seeds into the forest. There's so much that has benefit medicinally, even if we don't see it as a food. Lady slipper. It is. Oh, aren't they though? And they are fragile and they are in need of protection. But did you know that lady slipper tincture is actually a key ingredient in helping people overcome and deal with sexual trauma that happened at a very young age?
Oh, I didn't know that. That's really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And so, there are flower essences, there are things that we can access and use if we have them. So by all means, talk to your neighbors and try and get them on board. But even if they don't really get on board, become a guerrilla gardener.
Right.
And get out there and garden. Do you remember the guerrilla gardening crew
Yes, I
we
do. I
had?
love that whole, yeah.
Yeah, we made such a difference in the town of Salmon Arm and surrounding area. We would just swoop into an area that needed a bit of help, and we would, take out things that shouldn't be there, and then we would surreptitiously plant things. So we had people in, Fletcher Park in downtown Salmon Arm discovering our little bean plants planted in amongst their decorative stuff. Or we did We got the seeds from the gardener at Sorrento Center for these decorative cabbages that are lovely and round and open and very flat top
Yeah, they're beautiful.
until they start to flower, and then they look like a little Christmas tree. And there were pictures of them in one of the local papers about the mysterious Christmas tree looking plants. And we were giggling because they were our decorative cabbages. And, you know, so yeah, do it as surreptitiously as you have to, but do plant things in that area that have the food and the nutrition. The Shuswap plant system is so overrun with things that we do not even see as invasive. I remember buying a plant book back in the early 90s called Indian Herbology of North America. And I got it home, and it had dandelion and comfrey and yarrow. And, and you're seeing the problem. These are not native to North America, they are invasive.
Right.
And, you know, and yet because they're found all over North America, this woman had made this assumption that I think she featured the European mandrake on the cover. And I was like, oh dear.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, so paying attention to what's indigenous is really important. So, you know, when it comes to fall, big plantings and that, you've got time now. If you start now, you've got time to get that hole prepped, to get that tree. By the way, this is a fabulous, fabulous, fabulous time to go to garden centers and buy trees.
Yeah, they're like 1/4 of the original price right about now.
Yeah,
Just
they
under
don't want them anymore.
Yeah,
They don't want them anymore.
they don't want to pay them through the winter.
No. And for those of you who are really into like multi-fruit trees and growing yourself something really awesome and skookum, this is a really good time to get a hold of Jed and Louise at Elderberry Farm, just outside of Salmon Arm. I'm going to put a little plug in here for them because I think they're awesome and they do great stuff. And they have multiple fruit trees. So you can get like 3 plums in one tree, or 2 or 3 cherries on one tree, or 4 or 5 apples, or, you know, 2 or 3 pears. It's really a nice way for a one person garden to meet a lot of needs. As
Yeah,
you can attest, a cherry tree really produces more cherries than one family can use in a year.
absolutely. I can tell you 2 plum trees, which are coming ripe right now, is more plums than any of you could imagine, right?
I'm going to buy you a copy of the book Plum Jam.
Yeah,
Have you read? Have you
well,
ever read it?
we've been cutting and drying plums, and we're ready to can plums. But
Yep.
yeah,
Well, the picture book Plum Jam is about a family. It's a little kid's storybook, and it's about a family who buys a new house, and they're all excited in their old farmhouse that they bought. But there's a plum tree because they love plum jam. And that fall, the plums plop, 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 plop start to fall on the ground, and they go out and they gather them and they gather them and they gather them, and they make jam 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 and they make jam. And then winter sets in and they eat plum jam and they eat plum jam and they eat plum. Long about March, they're getting a little tired of the plum jam. Summertime and the garden's coming on, but they're plowing their way through this plum jam. And one day they finally open the very last jar of plum jam, and it's the last jar, and plop,
well,
the plums start falling from the tree again.
love it.
And yeah, so it's plum jam time. Get rid of last year's, bring this year's in.
Right, absolutely. I have a question for you before we get off roses. Is that um, in my other property, I would always, it's a bit higher and it gets more snow. That was up on 10th Avenue Southeast. I used to use peat moss around the roses so that they didn't freeze as solid Oh, what do you think about that? Do you think?
I think your roses need some winter protection.
Uh-huh.
Despite the balmy area that you are, I think they need peat moss in the fall.
Yeah.
But I also think that when you do your fall pruning, that you might want to look at providing them with some kind of cover around them.
Right.
I think the wind off the lake in
Yeah.
the wintertime is hurting your roses.
Okay.
You've got a remarkable amount of dieback on them, and we pruned pretty hard this spring.
Yeah.
And I was rather surprised to see how much
Growth or
dead bird and that there was. And I really think that you're getting no protection on them at all in the wintertime, and that although you're in a really mild place, it's mild because it's got that southern exposure, but in the wintertime that means it's also exposed to all the elements,
right.
and you probably don't get a nice healthy blankety cover of snow all over your roses
Oh,
in
we
the
don't.
winter. No.
So what would you think? Like, I have used cardboard boxes and then filled them up with, you know, with peat moss up
Yeah.
to nearly the top. But I guess you could, well, burlap.
Even just wrapping them in burlap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even just giving them a couple of wraps of burlap
Would do it.
lying around. Yeah, just so that they've got something that protects them a little bit from the harshness of that wind and frost
I
and
guess you
cold.
couldn't use gunny sacks because they probably treat them, right?
I don't think they do.
Oh, maybe they don't. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Candles and
Yeah,
don't. But yeah, so a
yeah.
little wrap,
Where
a
did I
little
saw
coat.
someplace selling coffee burlap sacks?
That would be
Just a
great. That
couple of
would be good.
bucks. I think it was someplace in Vernon.
Because they're a little bit thicker,
Oh,
those
it's
bags. Those would be perfect.
yeah. Yeah, and check with Shishwap coffee companies. You can
Okay,
get
that's a great idea. Yeah.
coffee bags.
Because you
Yeah,
could use them out year after year.
yeah, yeah. You can. You know, and of course, as we get into the last little bits of fall too, is it's really time to get your fall crops in. Like if you're starting to do some of your winter greenhouse things, you got to start thinking about that now. If you're
Yeah,
gonna
if I get my winter kale in, absolutely.
yeah. So, if you're going to be clearing out a bed to be planting, like this would be the time to do it. It's
Right.
also a really good time to give your strawberries and raspberries kind of a final cleanup before you get too far into fall.
What about a haircut? Do you believe in haircuts for strawberries?
Yeah, yeah. If you want to create any space in your bed, now's a good time. Maybe you got a friend you can give a bunch of plants to, or maybe you got another place to plant them. But yeah.
Up in Gooley Farm, they used to run over their strawberry beds with a lawnmower. I don't know about that idea, but
Well, I have a friend in northern Alberta, and she has this like quarter-mile long driveway, and she has a raspberry patch on
yeah.
either side. And this time of year, her husband runs over with the swather. He runs down one side of the driveway. He will run down the driveway that they picked this year, and that will cut it right down to the ground.
Why?
That means that the one that he isn't cutting, it will have nothing but new growth on it. It wouldn't have had any berries. So it'll come up in the spring as 2-year-old canes. It will bear like crazy. And where he just mowed, she will have canes coming up. Then when she harvests, he'll mow that. And so it's just back and forth and back and forth.
Oh, nice.
Every year, her patch never gets crazy on her. It never overgrows. It never goes nuts. So, this is a good time of year to get out any of your old dead cane.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, just your old dead shit. Just
And
yank
that's the
them up.
same with blackberries and raspberries.
Oh God, yeah, and you can yank them up by the roots. They don't even want to stay in the ground anymore. They're so done.
Right.
Yeah.
All
So,
right. Well, we're at the
then,
top of the hour. It was another great show. I learned
oh,
lots.
are we really?
Yeah, and I want to thank
Sure.
you ever so much for your wisdom, and I learned so much, which I appreciate. And You know, if you're listening to this show, please tell your friends. There's invaluable information here that it is really good for every year, year after year after year. I mean, it's the same months, it's the same calendar, and you can buy a new calendar for every year. But what we're talking about is good information for every season of the year, usually year after year after year. So please let people know how invaluable the show is.
All righty. And yeah, get out there and harvest. Get out there and bring home the bounty that you put all summer into using.
Absolutely. Well, until next week, be healthy, wealthy, and wise. And don't forget, start thinking about your winter, fall planting season.
Yep.
Get ready. And your root cellar. So,
yep. Get on
now.
it. Bye-bye.